Most people work their entire lives, yet money never works for them. They wake up tired, chase paychecks, and repeat the cycle without realizing the real problem is not income, it is ownership. This audiobook will show you how to build assets that keep paying you long after the work is done. You will learn how to shift from working for money to making money work for you. Stay until the end, because one idea here can completely change how you see wealth, time, and freedom forever. Chapter 1. The Asset Mindset Shift. Most people treat work as an endless treadmill of time exchanged for money. But building assets requires a different frame. Think in terms of ownership, leverage, and time liberation. This chapter rewires the way you view money by showing that wealth is created when you build systems that pay repeatedly without constant input. Start by understanding the key difference between income and assets. Income stops the moment you stop working, whereas assets are structures that can produce cash flow even while you sleep. An asset can be physical, like a rental property that pays monthly rent, intellectual, like a course that sells on autopilot, or financial, like dividend-paying stocks that distribute a portion of profits each quarter. Even a well-designed business can behave like an asset when its processes, team, and systems allow it to run without your minute-to-minute involvement. The most powerful shift is psychological. Stop asking how much you can earn today and begin asking what you can own that will continue to earn tomorrow. You will meet 3 core ideas in this chapter that will anchor the rest of the book: the principle of leverage, the rule of recurring cash, and the patience of compounding. Leverage means using tools, people, capital, or technology to multiply the effect of each hour you spend. When you hire a manager, build an automated funnel, or invest capital, you convert your constrained time into something scalable. The rule of recurring cash prioritizes assets that generate predictable payments rather than ones that rely solely on appreciation, because recurring cash funds reinvestment, pays expenses, and cushions downturns. Compounding requires patience. Assets reward those who keep building, reinvesting, and protecting gains across years, rather than flipping for quick wins. To internalize the asset mindset, begin with a short diagnostic exercise that takes fewer than 10 minutes. Write down every way you currently trade time for money, and then list 3 ways each of those activities could be converted into an asset. If you freelance by the hour, could you package a repeatable productized service? If you sell a skill, could you create a course or template that sells automatically? If you consult, could you license a process to other firms? This exercise is the bridge between thinking and design, because it forces you to map labor into leverageable output. Consider the story of Amina, a graphic designer who was exhausted by client deadlines and low margins. She decided to document her most repeatable branding workflows, build templates, and offer a subscription for monthly brand refresh assets. Within 6 months, a portion of her revenue required minimal time, and within a year, those subscriptions covered her basic expenses while she pursued higher margin projects. Amina's shift shows that the asset mindset is not reserved for founders with venture capital. It is a practical habit accessible to skilled people who choose to productize and package their work. Another practical principle is the unavoidable math of ownership. Calculate expected monthly cash flow, subtract recurring costs, and estimate the time investment to maintain the asset. Treat this as a small spreadsheet habit. If the net cash flow is negative or too small to justify effort, redesign the asset or seek a different structure. Assets are not valuable because they exist. They are valuable because they pay you reliably and scale. Risk management is part of the mindset too. Diversification of asset types, protecting downside with reserves, and designing redundancy in income streams reduces the chance that one failure collapses your finances. Think of your future self as a stakeholder. What arrangements will keep paying them even if you change jobs, move cities, or take a sabbatical? That future orientation changes daily choices. You will prefer investments that build capacity rather than immediate consumption that erodes optionality. The chapter also introduces the concept of operational friction, the amount of time and headache required to keep an asset running, and why great assets are low friction after initial setup. A duplex that requires 20 hours a month to manage is less useful than a syndication interest that earns similar yield with near zero management for you personally. Understanding friction helps you choose between building something yourself or investing in someone else's operation as a passive owner. A short case study contrasts two approaches to the same market. One entrepreneur manually processed every order for a niche product and scaled to a point of exhausting growth, while another automated fulfillment, outsourced customer service, and focused on marketing and product iteration. The second owner ended up with both higher margin and less stress. Leverage and operational design compound together. The systems you build to reduce friction become the engine of sustainable growth. Psychology returns in the form of patience and compounding discipline. To benefit from assets, you must reinvest returns, especially in the early stages when growth is fastest. This means resisting flashy purchases and allowing the asset base to expand. The discipline to reinvest is the single behavioral trait separating fast compounders from transient earners. The chapter closes with a pragmatic starter plan you can execute in the next 90 days. Commit to one small asset prototype, define the minimum viable offering, set a realistic price, create a simple acquisition funnel, and automate one operational task. Examples of prototypes include a 30-minute workshop sold monthly, a digital template library on a simple platform, or acquiring a single rental property with conservative leverage. Each prototype is low-cost, testable, and built to either be iterated or gracefully sunsetted if it fails. The point is to create a bias toward action paired with measurement. Finally, you will be asked to adopt one new habit. Each week, spend 30 minutes mapping potential assets in one domain of your life: skills, networks, content, or capital, and rank them by expected time to payoff and recurring yield. This weekly mapping trains your asset radar and turns abstract ideas into concrete projects. Adopting the asset mindset is not a one-time decision, but a slow architectural redesign of how you spend your attention, allocate capital, and measure success. When you finish this chapter, you will no longer think of work simply as time spent. You will begin to see every effort as either creating a liability or building an asset, and that small semantic shift alters nearly every decision you make about money, time, and freedom. Chapter 2. Cash flow. First, why income you can count on beats price hopes. Cash flow is the lifeblood of durable assets, and this chapter rewrites the money conversation. Stop praying for appreciation and start engineering predictable receipts. The human tendency is to chase rising prices, the dream of a single lucky flip or a sudden market surge. But lasting financial freedom is built from income you can count on when markets wobble. Think like a landlord who collects rent monthly, not like a speculator who hopes the property doubles in 5 years. Cash flow pays bills, funds reinvestment, and buys time to compound better ideas. The chapter breaks this principle into practical frameworks you can use immediately. Start by mapping potential assets across two axes: predictability and scalability. Predictability measures how reliably an asset pays in ordinary months. Scalability measures how easily you can expand the same system without proportional increases in your time. Dividend stocks, rental units in stable neighborhoods, subscription products, and licensing deals score high on predictability. Software with automated billing and audience-driven memberships score high on scalability when designed with repeatable funnels. Next, learn the yield-first test. Before you buy or build anything, calculate the likely cash flow yield after real costs, maintenance, taxes, fees, and reasonable vacancy or churn assumptions, and compare it to alternative uses of that capital. A high headline yield that collapses after fees is a mirage. A modest but consistent yield that survives stress is priceless. The chapter offers a simple 5-line yield checklist you can run for any opportunity: expected gross receipts, recurring operating costs, capital maintenance reserve, tax implications, and net after-tax yield. If the net yield supports a buffer and reinvestment, the asset passes. The book gives practical blueprints for 4 cash flow first vehicles and how to test them cheaply. For rental real estate, look for neighborhoods with stable employment, low vacancy, and reasonable purchase multiples. Run conservative stress scenarios where rents fall by 10% and maintenance spikes by 20%. For dividend strategies, prefer companies with rising free cash flow and payout ratios well below peak levels. Learn to read coverage, not to chase yield alone. For content and community, design small paid offers with high retention, monthly cohorts, vertical newsletters, or micro memberships with clear transformation, then test via small launches before scaling. For licensing and royalties, prototype on a small platform where reporting is transparent and royalties are paid with clear terms. The chapter emphasizes the virtue of layering multiple cash flows. Don't expect one perfect stream to carry you. Assemble a portfolio where small, dependable payments from different sources create robust coverage. This is the difference between fragile wealth and resilient wealth. Another major lesson addresses reinvestment discipline. Cash flow is only powerful when you apply it to compound. Reinvest a portion into acquiring more yield assets, deploy some to reduce high-cost liabilities, and keep a buffer to avoid forced sales during downturns. The chapter provides a behavioral rule. Allocate the first 30% of passive receipts to reinvestment, 50% to living and margin, and 20% to liquidity and optionality until the asset base reaches a scale where living costs are covered. Risk management gets a full section. Predictable income can be disrupted. Tenants leave, subscribers churn, dividends cut. So build hedges. A 3 to 6 month cash buffer, conservative leverage ratios, and diversified income sources. When leverage is used, ensure debt service coverage is rock solid even in stress tests. The chapter teaches the art of the pilot. Run every cash flow idea as an experiment. Launch a small pilot rental, a micro course, or a limited licensing test to measure churn, collection rates, and real net yield. Pilot results are more valuable than theory because they reveal operational friction you can fix before scale. The psychological shift concludes with a mindset exercise. Replace the question, "How fast can I get rich?" with "How reliably can I create income that frees me from overtime?" This reframe reduces risky behavior and focuses energy on systems that reward consistency. The chapter closes by giving a 90-day cash flow sprint. Pick one small, testable income asset, validate market demand with a minimum viable product or offer, confirm predictable payments, and document unit economics. If the pilot meets conservative thresholds, plan for incremental capital allocation and operational automation. Over months, small, steady income lines add up into durable freedom. By the end of this chapter, you will see why cash flow first thinking is not conservative so much as creative. Designing real receipts that let you play the long game without praying for luck. Chapter 3. Real Estate as an Income Ecosystem. Practical steps beyond the myths. Real estate has always been the archetypal perpetual asset, but the book rejects fairy tales and teaches a business-minded approach. Treat property as an income ecosystem you design, test, and iterate, rather than a toss-it-in and pray investment. The chapter begins by reframing common errors: chasing hot markets without operations, over-leveraging to buy the dream house, and ignoring maintenance reserves, and moves quickly into a layered framework for building rental portfolios that pay reliably. The first layer is model selection. Choose among single-family rentals for simplicity and tenant stability, small multifamily for scale and spread risk across units, or short-term rentals for location-driven arbitrage with higher management needs. Each model has different operational friction and requires a distinct playbook. The second layer is underwriting discipline. The author insists on 3 scenario models: optimistic, baseline, and downside, that explicitly include vacancy, maintenance spikes, property taxes, insurance, management fees, and conservative rent growth assumptions. Use baseline as your decision anchor. If your baseline cash flow is marginal, walk away. The chapter provides a hands-on underwriting template you can use in spreadsheet form with conservative inputs and automatic stress adjustments. Thirdly, the chapter teaches operational systems, tenant onboarding checklists, preventive maintenance schedules, and a trusted contractor network that reduces surprises. Low-friction properties are those where you can outsource the repetitive tasks to reliable operators or use turnkey partners without surrendering control over unit economics. The text emphasizes the importance of small legal structures, LLCs, clear lease terms, and documented SOPs, so the asset is transferable and managerial. Next, the book examines leverage prudently. Mortgages can accelerate returns, but also amplify downside. The rule is simple: stress test debt service coverage at higher interest rates and lower rents. If the asset survives, leverage may be acceptable. The chapter describes creative financing too: seller financing, partnerships, and syndications that allow capital-light exposure when you lack cash, but bring operational or sourcing skill as your equity. Syndications are explained as a pathway where you trade day-to-day labor for passive cash flow by investing in professionally run portfolios, but caution is provided. Vet operators by track record, alignment of economics, and transparency in reporting. Another major section covers exit and scaling strategies. Real estate owners should plan both for hold and for optional exits. Refinance to extract equity while keeping the asset, or package properties into small portfolios for sale at multiples when operational improvements have been demonstrated. Tax optimization and maintenance of depreciation schedules are practical levers, but the core remains net cash flow and tenant stability. The chapter also tackles location selection with a principles-first approach. Job growth, population stability, and rental demand fundamentals beat viral social media market picks. Micro-neighborhood analysis is recommended over citywide hunches. Small streets often behave differently from headlines. Practical pilots are encouraged. Start with a single conservative unit, document actual expenses meticulously, and use the lessons to scale methodically. Lastly, the chapter addresses psychological readiness. Real estate requires patience and operational tolerance for occasional crises, broken heaters, difficult tenants, or regulatory shifts. Build your reserve fund and choose partners whose temperament complements yours. Some investors excel at sourcing deals, while others at operations. Real estate done well can be a low-friction income machine when systems are in place: predictable tenant selection, preventive maintenance, responsible leverage, and clear governance. When treated like a business rather than a status asset, property becomes a generator of steady receipts that you can reinvest to compound the freedom you seek. Chapter 4. Businesses that pay you forever. Productize, systemize, and step back. Owning a business can be identical to trading time unless it is designed to operate without you. This chapter teaches the transformation from self-employed founder to owner of a cash-flowing enterprise by focusing on 3 pillars: productization, systemization, and governance. Productization means turning bespoke services into repeatable offers with clear scope, price, and delivery templates so they can be sold, measured, and delegated. Consultants become subscription advisors. Designers sell template libraries, and coaches launch cohort models. The chapter gives a practical roadmap to productize. Identify the highest demand, repeatable task you perform, strip it to its essential steps, create a fixed deliverable, price it transparently, and pilot with a handful of clients. The goal is to convert time-based invoices into recurring revenue or scalable transactions. Systemization is the operational backbone. Document every repeatable process, create quality control checklists, and build automated workflows for client onboarding, billing, and fulfillment. The author illustrates how a small bakery owner moved from 12-hour days to running a multi-location brand by codifying recipes, training staff with simple modules, and centralizing procurement. When core processes are captured, you can delegate with confidence and measure outcomes via a few key metrics like gross margin per product, customer acquisition cost, and lifetime value. Governance converts a run-and-react shop into a steady enterprise. Create a management rhythm, weekly KPI reviews, monthly financials, and a clear decision matrix assigning responsibility. Hire or develop at least one manager whose success depends on operational outcomes, not founder presence. The chapter explains incentive design. Tie compensation to reliable operational metrics and include modest equity to align long-term thinking. Franchising, licensing, and platform models are presented as strategic exits or scaling moves when the product and systems are repeatable across markets. Franchising transfers growth capital and local operations to partners, while licensing allows your IP to work for others for royalties. The author warns against vanity metrics and growth for growth's sake. Sustainable businesses prioritize healthy unit economics and controllable churn. Financial hygiene is emphasized. Clean books, regular cash forecasts, and explicit working capital policies prevent the all-too-common founder trap of confusing revenue growth with profit and cash. The chapter includes a founder's 90-day plan. Choose one revenue line to productize, document the delivery in one page, build a simple funnel to sell 5 units, and delegate a single fulfillment task. The plan forces minimum viable systemization and creates a teachable process. Chapter 5. Intellectual property and royalties. Create once, earn repeatedly. Ideas are among the most powerful perpetual assets because intellectual property scales infinitely with near zero marginal cost. And this chapter shows how to structure creations for long-term income rather than one-off applause. The first section reframes creative work as product design. An article, course, book, patent, or piece of music should be treated like a small factory that can be packaged, protected, and distributed. Protectable IP, patents for inventions, copyrights for written and audio works, and trademarks for brands, gives you legal leverage to license or monetize your creations. The chapter lays out a practical roadmap to transform expertise into income streams. Start by identifying a narrow audience with a persistent need and create a compact product that solves a real, measurable problem. For authors and educators, this means a short, actionable course with clear outcomes. For inventors, it means MVP prototypes and vetted claims to follow patent counsel. For artists, it means building catalogs and securing clear licensing terms. Next, design distribution channels that fit your audience: marketplaces, direct sales funnels, partnerships with platforms, or B2B licensing deals. Each channel has trade-offs in margin, control, and reach. The chapter gives concrete examples. A course sold directly via email and a landing page retains higher margins but requires marketing work. A course hosted on a marketplace trades margin for reach and ease. Royalties and licensing are explained in terms of structures and negotiation points. Upfront fees versus percentage royalties. Term length, territory, exclusivity, and audit rights. The author advises modest upfront fees when validating new IP and richer royalty splits when proven demand and scale exist. Clear contract templates and reporting clauses protect long-term income and provide transparency. The chapter also details maintenance of discoverability. IP without visibility dies slowly. Plan for ongoing promotional cycles, occasional launches, content refreshes, and partnerships to keep listings near the top of niche searches. Evergreen products benefit from small, periodic reinvestments in visibility rather than one-time big pushes. For inventors and patent holders, the chapter tackles commercialization paths: license to manufacturers, create a spin-out company, or partner with established distributors. Each path requires different capital and time. Licensing is capital light, but requires strong legal terms and trusted partners, while building a company retains upside but needs operational focus. Another major topic is modularization. Break large IP into smaller, repackagable components, chapters into short micro courses, songs into samples and sync licenses, patents into application-specific licenses to increase monetization pathways. Finally, the chapter addresses legacy and control. Use simple ownership structures to preserve rights for heirs and to allow ongoing management or sale by trusted stewards. Intellectual property done well is not passive because initial work matters, but it becomes low friction over time when rights are protected, distribution is automated, and royalties compound. Adopt a creator's quarterly rhythm. Produce small offerings. Test market fit. Lock reasonable legal protections. And set modest promotion budgets that keep discovery alive. When you treat ideas as durable assets, you convert effort into streams that pay you again and again, and the long arc of compound royalties becomes a core pillar of perpetual income. Chapter 6. Strategic Partnerships and Leverage. Accelerating growth without burning out. Strategic partnerships are the most underrated accelerator for asset builders because they let you borrow distribution, credibility, or operational capacity while keeping your own capital and energy focused on core strengths. This chapter reframes partnerships not as vague collaborations, but as engineered experiments with clear success criteria, exit clauses, and measured return paths. The opening scene follows two entrepreneurs who both had a great product but different bottlenecks. One had audience and marketing reach. The other had a perfected manufacturing process. When they piloted a revenue share bundle with a short test window, both discovered scalable economics that neither could have achieved alone. The first practical lesson is partner discovery with intent. Map the gap in your asset engine, distribution, capital, operations, or trust, and list partners that own that gap. Don't waste time chasing brands. Target partners whose assets complement your own. Next, design small reversible pilots. A pilot might be a co-branded product limited to one market, a split revenue funnel for a single month, or a white-labeled offering to test product fit. Structure the pilot with clear metrics: conversion rate, customer acquisition cost, churn, and gross margin contribution, so you can decide quantitatively whether to scale or stop. The chapter gives legal and commercial templates for pilots, short-term term sheets with duration, KPIs, and an agreed data sharing protocol. Transparency in metrics prevents the most common partnership failure, which is misaligned expectations about who handles which cost and who owns the customer relationship after the pilot. Governance is also central. Create a one-page operating appendix for any partnership that codifies decision rights, reporting cadence, dispute resolution, and brand usage rules. Small operational frictions, unclear approval processes, mismatched SLAs, or inconsistent customer service compound into large relationship toxicity. An appendix prevents that entropy. The text then dives into alignment of incentives. Design the economics so every party benefits in proportion to contribution and risk. Use modest upfront guarantees when partners bring high distribution but low confidence, and favor revenue share or royalty structures when your product requires validation. Equity can be useful when both parties seek long-term upside, but beware of giving away governance for distribution. Keep control mechanisms that preserve your ability to pivot. The chapter includes case studies of successful scaling models. Content creators licensing a course to a platform in exchange for a percentage of sales and a paid marketing push. Small manufacturers entering a distribution deal with a retailer in return for guaranteed minimum orders. And tech founders forming integration partnerships that unlock enterprise sales. Each example stresses careful measurement. Track cohort-level economics so you understand true customer lifetime value under the partnership, not the vanity metric of initial unit sales. Risk management is a major theme. Partnerships introduce counterparty risk, so due diligence is required. Vet partner track records, request references, and seek transparent reporting. Start with short commitments to limit exposure and build escalation rules into the contract. If metrics fall short, reduce exposure. If they exceed expectations, scale investment proportionally. Cultural fit matters as much as contractual clarity. Partners with mismatch in decision speed, quality standards, or customer treatment will generate friction even if the economics look attractive. The chapter prescribes a small cultural probe. Run a brief joint team session on a low-stakes problem to observe collaboration behaviors before you sign long-term agreements. For capital-constrained builders, the chapter explains syndications and joint ventures as mechanisms to scale without diluting operational focus. Syndications allow you to aggregate investor capital under an operator who runs assets. They are efficient when you lack cash but have sourcing skills. Joint ventures can share operational control and risk but require stronger governance and exit planning. The chapter closes with partnership lifecycle guidance. Treat every partnership as a project with phases: discovery, pilot, scale, optimize, and exit, and monitor the economics at each stage. When partners perform, formalize scale terms. When they don't, wind down cleanly and preserve relationships for future tests. Finally, adopt a partnership playbook within your practice. Keep a short list of potential partners in your vertical, run 2 pilots every year, and document lessons so each new collaboration becomes faster and less risky. Strategic partnerships are not magic shortcuts. They are structured leverage. When designed with care, they convert someone else's engine into your growth catalyst without burning your bandwidth or compromising long-term control. Chapter 7. Structure, taxes and legal design, protecting and preserving perpetual income. Designing assets that last requires legal and tax structures that minimize leakage and protect downside while keeping flexibility for growth. This chapter moves from high-level strategy to concrete architecture, explaining how entity choice, tax planning, and legal safeguards preserve cash flow and shield you from avoidable costs. The chapter starts with a simple truth: ownership without structure invites fragility. A sole proprietor who owns rental units and a business without separate entities exposes personal assets to operational risk while paying avoidable taxes. The first practical layer is entity selection and purpose. Use separate entities for operational liability, investment holdings, and intellectual property to keep risk localized. Common structures include single-member LLCs for individual properties, Series LLCs or holding companies for portfolios, and corporations or LLCs for operating businesses. Each has trade-offs in liability protection, administrative cost, and tax treatment that must be evaluated in context. Next, the chapter delves into tax strategy as a planning pillar. Taxes are not an afterthought. They materially affect net yield. The book explains fundamentals like leveraging depreciation on real estate to shelter income, using tax-advantaged retirement accounts for long-term investments, and harvesting tax losses in financial portfolios to offset gains. For creators and IP holders, the chapter covers the advantage of licensing through entities to centralize revenue and deduct legitimate business expenses while preserving personal shielding. International readers receive practical tips about cross-border royalty withholding, treaty benefits, and the importance of local counsel when licensing into foreign markets. The chapter emphasizes documentation. Clean books, consistent invoicing, and clear contracts reduce audit risk and make value visible for potential partners or buyers. Legal design covers the full life cycle: ownership agreements, buy-sell clauses, succession planning, and clarity on who controls decisions. For multi-owner assets, construct operating agreements that define decision thresholds, capital call procedures, and transfer restrictions to prevent uncomfortable disputes later. Estate planning is included because perpetual assets only stay perpetual when transferred cleanly. Use trusts, family-limited partnerships, or other vehicles to provide liquidity for estate taxes, preserve continuity, and embed governance for heirs who may not be operators. The chapter gives simple templates for liquidity planning. Estimate likely estate tax exposure, design a funding source, insurance, sale provisions, or trust, and iron out transfer rules in advance. Compliance and regulatory strategy are practical and necessary. For regulated businesses or assets, short-term rentals, financial products, or IP monetization across platforms, maintain compliance calendars, renew critical registrations, and budget for legal maintenance. Small failures in compliance create outsized operational disruptions. Another crucial area is contracts and enforceability. Negotiate licensing, customer, and partnership contracts with audit rights, clear payment terms, and defined remedies for breach. In revenue-sharing models, demand transparent reporting and reserve audit clauses so you can verify royalties and revenue streams. The chapter also discusses protecting downside with insurance, errors and omissions, general liability, cyber liability, and business interruption insurance are core for many assets. Insurance is an operational cost that buys peace of mind and prevents forced liquidation under stress. The book does not offer one-size-fits-all legal advice. Instead, it provides decision frameworks and checklists for conversations with advisors. Vet counsel for practical experience in your asset class, define clear engagement scopes, and ask for a written plan to implement recommended structures. The chapter ends with a cost-benefit ritual. For any structural recommendation, estimate administrative cost, expected tax or risk benefit, and break-even horizon. This discipline prevents over-engineering and ensures that structures are justified by economics. Protecting assets is not paranoia, it is prudent stewardship. When you align entity design, tax planning, legal safeguards, and estate mechanisms, you preserve the hard work of building perpetual income and create options that allow your assets to survive life changes, market cycles, and opportunities for graceful exits. Chapter 8. Risk Management and Resilience. Designing assets to survive shocks. If perpetual income is the goal, resilience is the operational imperative, because shocks, market downturns, tenant vacancies, platform policy changes, or health crises are inevitable. This chapter teaches pragmatic stress testing and recovery playbooks that keep your cash flows intact and your options open. The opening vignette profiles a small syndication that thrived until a local economic shock halved rents. Those with buffers and diversified income retooled quickly, while those without reserves sold assets at depressed prices. Start with a robust stress testing habit. Model downside scenarios with realistic assumptions, revenue declines, cost spikes, increased interest rates, and longer sale timelines, and calculate at what point you must raise capital, reduce distributions, or sell. Use multiple stress levels, mild, moderate, and severe, and plan specific responses for each. Liquidity is the first defense. Maintain a cash buffer size to cover operating expenses through 2 to 6 months, depending on asset volatility. For real estate, this means a reserve for maintenance and vacancy. For subscription businesses, a buffer to cover churn and marketing reacquisition. For creators, a reserve to sustain content cadence during revenue gaps. The chapter emphasizes flexible debt structures as the second layer. Favor rate floors, interest-only periods, or covenant-light terms when possible during acquisition to reduce the chance of forced deleveraging under stress. Refinancing strategies are explored. When markets are favorable, extract conservative equity to build buffers. When they are tight, prioritize deleveraging to reduce carrying costs. Diversification is not just about asset classes, but about return drivers. Combine assets that pay via different mechanisms, rents, royalties, dividends, and service margins, so a single macro shock does not simultaneously depress all streams. The author introduces the Portfolio Resilience Matrix, a simple table that maps assets against shock types and recovery timelines to identify correlated vulnerabilities. Operational resilience receives deep treatment. Documented SOPs, cross-trained teams, and multiple vendor relationships prevent single-point failures. For creators and businesses, maintain backup platforms for distribution and store critical assets in multiple locations to avoid platform-specific outages. Insurance is part of the toolkit. Understand policy limits, exclusions, and claims processes before you need them. The chapter also addresses human resilience, leadership, and mindset under stress. Practice scenario rehearsals with your team. Simulate a revenue shortfall and walk through communication, customer retention, and cost management steps. Chapter 9. Scaling, Liquidity, and Exit Architecture. Scaling an asset from one unit to a portfolio and creating clean liquidity options are strategic skills that separate temporary earners from perpetual owners. Treat scaling as system design rather than hustle. Repeatable processes, measurable unit economics, and low marginal time per extra dollar are the hallmarks of a scalable asset. Start by documenting a minimum viable asset playbook that a competent operator could run after 2 weeks of onboarding. Map the core steps, average time inputs, key vendors, and the checklist that preserves quality while enabling delegation. Measure contribution margin per unit, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, churn, and operational friction in an accessible dashboard. If you cannot explain unit economics in a single page, then you cannot scale reliably. Complexity kills predictability and deters buyers. When numbers are stable, you can choose how to scale. Hire operators, buy complementary units, automate repetitive tasks, or partner with distribution specialists. Each path has trade-offs. Hiring reduces founder time, but introduces payroll risk. Automation lowers marginal cost, but demands upfront engineering. Partnerships provide reach with shared economics and counterparty risk. Leverage capital thoughtfully. Debt can accelerate growth, but stress test debt service coverage ratios against conservative downside scenarios. Use modest leverage when yield exceeds safe borrowing costs and when stress tests show comfortable coverage at higher rates and lower revenue. For real estate, test cash flow if rents fall 15% and vacancy doubles. For subscription models, test revenue if churn increases by half. Partnerships scale reach without absorbing all operational burden, but require clear pilots, transparent data sharing, aligned incentives, and firm exit terms. Pilot partnerships with short-term revenue share deals, explicit KPIs, and a one-page operating appendix that defines reporting, dispute resolution, and termination triggers. Protect transferability early. Separate intellectual property, cleanly assign customer contracts, and centralize documentation so a buyer or partner can operate without founder presence. Buyers pay for predictable cash flow and transferable systems. Remove single-person dependencies and diversify customer concentration before you seek liquidity. Prepare tidy financials and a data room that includes historical P&Ls, monthly cash flow, cohort analyses, customer contracts, SOPs, and a simple cap table. Mock diligence quarterly to catch gaps early. Fix small issues now when they are cheap rather than during a sale process, when leverage shifts and value fractures. Consider staged liquidity options beyond an all-or-nothing sale. Partial secondary sales, dividend recaps, refinancing to extract conservative equity, and structured earnouts that align future performance with price. A dividend recapitalization might return capital while retaining control if cash flows are stable. Refinancing can fund new acquisitions, but watch covenants. Earnouts bridge valuation gaps, but design objective metrics, reasonable periods, and escrow for indemnities so the seller is fairly compensated without open-ended exposure. Legal and tax architecture influences liquidity choices. Entity structures, IP ownership, and international withholding rules affect net proceeds and post-deal flexibility. Plan tax smart pathways with qualified advisors before transactions occur to avoid surprises and to preserve more of the realized value for reinvestment. Chapter 10. Portfolio Construction and Asset Allocation. Designing a durable income mix. Building one asset is good. Building a resilient portfolio of assets is how you make income durable. This chapter teaches you how to move from ad hoc ownership to a deliberately balanced portfolio that reduces volatility, increases optionality, and smooths cash flow across cycles. Think of allocation as architecture. You choose materials for strength, flexibility, and maintenance cost. Your job is to design an asset mix that supports your life goals rather than chases the loudest returns of the moment. Start with clarity about objectives. Are you focused on near-term living coverage, long-term wealth accumulation, legacy transfer, or a mix? Your allocation flows from purpose. If you need monthly coverage soon, prioritize higher yield, predictable income streams. If your horizon is decades, growth-oriented assets with compounding potential can have a larger share. The chapter introduces a simple three-bucket model to clarify decisions. Stability bucket for short-term safety, cash equivalents, short bonds, liquid income. Income bucket for recurring receipts, rental net cash flow, subscription revenue, dividends, royalties. And growth optionality bucket for long-run compounding and asymmetric upside, equity growth, private equity, high-growth business reinvestment. Each bucket has a function. Stability preserves optionality and prevents forced sales. Income funds living and reinvestment. Growth accelerates wealth when time is your ally. Allocation is not static. Use rebalancing rules to harvest performance and to buy low systematically. A simple calendar rule: rebalance quarterly or when a bucket deviates more than a fixed percentage, forces discipline and avoids the psychological trap of letting winners dominate your risk profile. The mechanical benefit is clear. You sell a bit of what's hot and buy what's cheap. Over decades, this dampens regret and compounds better. Diversification deserves nuance. Don't confuse variety with resilience. Owning 5 businesses in the same vertical is not real diversification. Your portfolio still shares a single economic driver. True diversification blends uncorrelated return drivers, rental income tied to local employment cycles, dividend flows from global corporations, royalties linked to content demand, and a business whose revenue is subscription-based. Correlation changes in crises. Assets that looked uncorrelated during expansion can move together in a downturn. That's why stress testing your mix across scenarios matters. Model a recession that cuts rents, lowers consumer spending, and squeezes ad revenue simultaneously, and see if your combined receipts still cover essential needs. The chapter covers risk budgeting. Instead of thinking only about percentages, think in terms of drawdown tolerance and time to recovery per asset. How long would it take for a given asset to return to prior cash flow after a severe shock? A low time to recovery asset is more valuable when you depend on income now. Assign a higher weight in your portfolio to assets with short recovery profiles if your horizon is nearer. Leverage strategy is part of allocation design. Debt boosts returns but increases fragility. Use leverage selectively where cash flow coverage under stress tests remains comfortable. Treat leverage as an amplifier you deploy with explicit rules: maximum loan-to-value, minimum coverage ratio, and a plan for changing interest cost environments. For many builders, conservative leverage on real estate or targeted business loans that fund scalable customer acquisition can be smart. Indiscriminate margin use in volatile instruments is not. Tax-aware allocation enhances net yield. Different assets face different tax treatments: qualified dividends, long-term capital gains, ordinary income from royalties, or rental income after depreciation. Consult good advisors and structure holdings accordingly. Put highly taxed assets in tax-advantaged accounts where possible, and preserve low-tax or tax-efficient assets in taxable buckets. The chapter encourages periodic tax harvesting. Realize small losses to offset gains, convert high basis assets when markets offer opportunity, and plan charitable gifts that match your goals. Liquidity planning sits beside allocation. Perpetual income is compatible with illiquidity when you design fallback plans. Not every asset must be instantly convertible, but you must map access points, emergency liquidity lines, callable credit facilities, or a buffer of liquid instruments to prevent selling core assets at depressed prices. The chapter offers a simple liquidity ladder: immediate cash, 30 to 90 days; accessible near cash, 3 to 12 months, and strategic illiquid assets, multi-year hold. Portfolio governance is the final piece. Set an allocations dashboard that shows bucket weights, contribution to total cash flow, and a small set of health metrics per asset: yield, operational friction, time to recover. Review monthly and run quarterly stress sessions that simulate shocks. Establish allocation guardrails, maximum concentration thresholds per asset, per sector, and per counterparty to avoid cascade risks. The chapter ends with a practical exercise. Create your first 3-bucket allocation, populate it with existing holdings and potential additions, run a single stress scenario, and write a 90-day plan to close evident gaps. Portfolio construction is not academic. It is iterative engineering. When you move from single assets to a thought-out portfolio, perpetual income becomes resilient, scalable, and aligned with the life you want to live. Chapter 12. Technology, Data, and Automation. Modern tools to run perpetual income. Technology multiplies human capacity when used to reduce friction, increase reach, and lower marginal costs. This chapter shows how modern tools and data systems convert once manual income processes into scalable, low-friction engines. Think of automation as the plumbing of your asset house. When properly installed, it quietly carries volume without drama. Begin with audit and prioritization. Map all repetitive steps across your assets: tenant screening, billing, customer onboarding, content publishing, royalty reporting, investor updates. Score tasks by frequency, time cost, and error risk. High-frequency, low-complexity tasks are automation gold. Use a 3-step play. Standardize the task, document the workflow, and automate or outsource. Standardization reduces edge cases. Documentation enables automation. Practical tool choices depend on asset class. For rental portfolios, property management platforms that automate billing, maintenance tickets, and tenant communications save hours and reduce disputes. For subscription businesses, robust recurring billing systems, invoice dunning automation, and customer success workflows reduce churn. For creators, content management systems, scheduled publishing, and affiliate tracking maintain discoverability without daily manual posting. Use API-first services where possible to stitch systems together rather than heavy custom builds. Low-code automation platforms can connect your CRM, accounting, and customer support without large engineering costs. Data hygiene is critical. Automation amplifies bad data quickly. Maintain clean customer records, consistent tagging of revenue sources, and standard naming conventions for contracts and SKUs. Build a simple data dashboard that surfaces key metrics: recurring revenue, churn, margin per unit, and cash collection days. When a dashboard fails to update correctly, stop automations and fix data flows before proceeding. Machine learning and AI are useful, but not magical. Use AI to accelerate content generation drafts, summarize long documents, or triage customer support tickets. Always pair outputs with human review, especially where quality and brand voice matter. Predictive analytics can help forecast churn or maintenance needs. For example, predicting appliances likely to fail based on usage patterns, enabling preemptive action that preserves cash flow. Security and compliance cannot be afterthoughts. Protect payment data with PCI-compliant providers, encrypt sensitive documents, and maintain access controls. Automations that expose data broadly create legal and reputational risk. Design audit logs and least privilege access so you can trace actions and respond quickly to incidents. Automation also helps investor and partner relations. Use automated monthly statements, simple cap table tools, and scheduled performance emails to reduce ad hoc requests. Regular transparent reporting builds trust and scales busy work out of ownership responsibilities. Finally, culture and capability matter. Technology requires maintenance and improvement. Hire or partner with a reliable operations lead or technology integrator who understands your asset mix, speaks both business and technical languages, and can iterate tools as needs evolve. Treat automation as a product with versioning and backlogs, not a one-time installation. The chapter closes with a practical sprint. Pick one repetitive task that costs you or your team more than 2 hours weekly. Document it in one page, select a simple automation tool to pilot, and measure time recovered over 45 days. Small pipeline automations compound into meaningful time leverage. Technology turns fixed efforts into scalable infrastructure. Use it to reduce friction, not to hide bad process. When automation and disciplined data meet, perpetual assets run smoother and pay more reliably. Chapter 13. Teams, Talent, and Leadership. Building people engines that run without you. Assets scale when people operate systems reliably. This chapter transforms the abstract idea of delegation into a concrete leadership method for owners who want income without perpetual operational presence. Leadership for asset owners is design work. Hire with the future in mind, train for autonomy, and create decision frameworks that preserve quality without daily oversight. Start with role clarity. Define the smallest set of outcomes each hire is responsible for and document the measures of success. Replace vague job descriptions with one-page role contracts, listing the primary metric, authority boundaries, and escalation rules. Micro-roles reduce overlap and clarify ownership. For small portfolios or businesses, hire generalists capable of wearing multiple hats with clean SOPs to reduce friction. Recruitment focuses on signals of reliability, past patterns of consistent delivery, clear references that speak to follow-through, and examples of building reliable processes. Use short practical tests in hiring, small work samples that mimic routine tasks, to assess competence and cultural fit. Avoid hiring solely for charisma or technical brilliance without evidence of operational discipline. Training accelerates delegation. Create lean onboarding modules that capture core operations. A 5-step tenant onboarding playbook, a checklist for launching a new course cohort, or the escalation ladder for customer complaints. Use job shadowing and recorded walkthroughs. The goal is to make tacit knowledge explicit. Document common edge cases so operators can resolve issues without constantly escalating to you. Incentives align behavior. Blend base pay with simple outcome incentives, retention bonuses, revenue share on new subscriptions, or performance-based equity, so team members feel ownership of long-term results. Design incentives that reward sustainable behavior, not short-term hacks. For example, tie a portion of bonuses to customer retention metrics rather than one-time sales. Decision frameworks reduce bottlenecks. Adopt RACI-like clarity, where people know who can decide what and when to consult. Encourage managers to make decisions within defined thresholds and to document rationales for non-standard choices. Small daily stand-ups and concise dashboards keep leadership informed without micromanaging. Culture is stewardship. Hire for humility, curiosity, and bias to documentation. Reward those who improve processes and share templates. Celebrate small reliability wins publicly. A month of on-time rent collections, a cohort retention improvement, or a systems automation that saved hours weekly. Public recognition reinforces behaviors. Risk of founder dependency is real. Rotate responsibilities periodically, cross-train critical roles, and maintain a bench of vetted contractors for surge capacity. Succession planning is practical. Name a successor for key operational roles and run mini handover drills to validate continuity. Leadership presence shifts from firefighting to stewardship. Spend your time on talent development, capital allocation, and strategic partnerships rather than ticket triage. Coach managers to solve problems up to their authority limit and escalate only the exceptions. The chapter's close offers a 90-day team upgrade plan. Map critical roles. Create one-page role contracts. Design 2 onboarding modules. Implement 1 incentive tied to retention or margin, and run a cross-training sprint. Great assets are people-powered. Design your team so it doubles your time, not your stress. Chapter 14. Impact, Ethics, and Sustainable Wealth. Aligning profit with purpose. Long-term wealth that lasts is more durable when it aligns with ethical practice and positive impact. This chapter argues that sustainable assets are not only financially robust, but socially legitimate. Aligning incentives with long-term stakeholders reduces regulatory, reputational, and operational risk, while opening new partnership and capital channels. Start by defining your impact thresholds. What harms must you avoid? What positive outcomes do you seek to enable? For asset owners, this means simple red lines: no predatory lending, no exploitative labor practices, and proactive contributions, local hiring, environmental mitigation, or mission-aligned giving. Clear thresholds guide decisions in ambiguous deals. Impact creates business value. Customers and partners increasingly prefer collaborators with ethical practices. Impact-aligned assets often access lower-cost capital via mission funds, impact investors, or community lenders. Additionally, avoiding scandals and regulatory backlash protects multiples at exit. The chapter provides examples where small ethical choices, transparent lease terms, safe product labeling, or community reinvestment reduced churn and attracted higher quality partners. Measurement is practical, not moralizing. Choose a few tractable KPIs: tenant satisfaction score, percentage of revenue reinvested locally, carbon intensity per unit of production, or percentage of suppliers audited for labor standards. Track them on the same dashboard as financial metrics. Measurement turns values into operational priorities. Ethical design extends to governance. Include independent advisors or community representatives for significant projects, particularly in real estate or platform businesses that affect many stakeholders. Simple governance structures reduce conflict and improve local acceptance. Philanthropy and evergreen giving convert perpetual income into lasting societal benefit. Consider endowments or donor-advised funds that pay for causes perpetually using income from your assets rather than one-time gifts. This approach sustains impact and can create meaningful tax efficiency. Impact also means listening. Community engagement during planning phases prevents costly opposition and improves design. Run short listening sessions before acquisition or product launches to surface concerns that could become legal or reputational problems. Finally, ethics is long-term due diligence. When vetting partners, include ethical criteria and reputation history. Negotiate contractual clauses that preserve standards and provide remedies for breaches. The chapter closes with a 3-part impact checklist. Avoid clear harms. Measure a few key outcomes and allocate a small, regular portion of income to local reinvestment. Aligning profit and purpose is not philanthropy alone. It is an enterprise strategy that preserves assets and multiplies value over decades. Chapter 15. The Founder's Long Game: Habits, Renewal, and Legacy Planning. The final chapter turns inward. Building perpetual income is technical, but sustaining it requires an interior architecture, habits, renewal practices, and a plan for handing off the work when you choose. This chapter collects the rhythms that separate transient hustlers from steward owners. First, habit rhythms. Owners who last schedule weekly time for three disciplines: financial review, operational audit, and creative strategy. Financial review is not daily worry, but a calm weekly check of cash flow and KPI exceptions. Operational audit spot checks procedures and customer experience. Creative strategy protects growth, small experiments, partnership outreach, and product iteration. Second, renewal routines. Preventing burnout is part of asset stewardship. Block restorative periods, mini sabbaticals, digital-free weeks, or quarterly learning retreats. Treat rest as an investment in better decisions and longer tenure. The chapter encourages micro-rituals that protect attention: morning intention setting, an evening one-line reflection, and weekly no-meeting afternoons for deep work. Third, leadership succession and legacy. Decide what perpetual income is for: personal freedom, family stewardship, or public good. Draft a simple legacy map that includes successor identification, governance roles, and a financial plan to support transitions. Use legal vehicles, trusts, shareholder agreements, or family offices to encode intentions and reduce future conflict. Fourth, continuous learning and humility. Markets shift and new asset forms appear. Maintain a learning budget, courses, 2 relevant books per quarter, and a network of peers for calibration. Run a quarterly advisory session with trusted peers to test assumptions and expand perspective. Finally, ethical retirement design. If you plan to step back, design phased exits, maintain a board role, transition to an advisory capacity, or set clear performance gates for successor autonomy. Protect the asset's mission and income by aligning incentives across generations. Close with a practice. Write a 10-year letter to your future self describing the life you want your assets to fund. Use it to orient decisions this quarter. Perpetual income is not an end. It is a tool for living a chosen life. Build with purpose, steward with care, and pass forward with intention. Chapter 16. Advanced tax strategies and estate planning. Keep more of what you build. Taxes and inheritance rules can quietly erode decades of disciplined asset building unless you design structures that reduce leakage and preserve optionality. And this chapter is a hands-on primer for making your perpetual income legally efficient and family-ready. Start with the basic mindset. Tax planning is not cheating the system. It is designing how you legitimately allocate returns across time and entities so your assets compound faster and transfer cleaner. The practical work begins with entity architecture. Separate operating assets from holding assets by using distinct entities: an LLC or operating company for day-to-day business, a holding company for passive investments, and trusts or family offices for legacy planning. Because liability rings, tax treatments, and transfer rules differ greatly across structures. Next, focus on income character. Different income types are taxed differently. Understand how ordinary income, qualified dividends, long-term capital gains, interest and royalties are treated in your jurisdiction and structure distributions to maximize favorable treatment. Chapter 17. Behavioral Finance. Designing your life to avoid common money pitfalls. Assets are engineered by numbers, but they are built or broken by behavior. So this chapter converts cognitive science into a practical risk reduction protocol that keeps your plan on track through psychological storms. Begin by recognizing the core human biases that derail asset strategies. Loss aversion makes you sell winners too early or hold losers too long. Recency bias makes you overweight the latest market narrative. Overconfidence leads to excessive concentration. And social comparison tempts consumption that erodes capital. The antidote is pre-commitment architecture. Build rule-based guardrails that automate sensible choices. Automatic reinvestment mandates for a fixed percentage of passive receipts. Preset rebalancing thresholds for your portfolio. And spending rules tied to sustainable yield rather than headline wealth. The chapter offers an operational toolkit, decision templates you can adopt immediately, a monthly cash allocation rule that funnels 30% of passive receipts into reinvestment until your target passive income covers essentials, a 72-hour cooling rule for large discretionary purchases to prevent impulse drain, and a standard diversification checklist before any large purchase or sale to ensure you do not concentrate risk inadvertently. Next, design behavioral nudges to exploit human tendencies for good. Use commitment devices like public mini-promises to accountability partners. Set up small financial penalties that discourage deviation. For example, a modest donation to a cause you dislike if you miss a savings target. And gamify progress with visible trackers and micro-rewards to sustain consistency. The chapter then addresses the emotional costs of money, shame, envy, and avoidance, and prescribes practices to reduce cognitive tax. A weekly check-in that reframes slips as data, not moral failure. A no-shame restart ritual that gets you back into routine quickly. And a quarterly learning session where you analyze mistakes in a forensic but kind way to extract improvements. Social dynamics matter too. Surround yourself with peers who model long-term thinking. Join mastermind groups, investor circles, or local owner networks where patience and stewardship are the norms. Reduce toxic signals by limiting exposure to spend-focused social feeds and instead curate resources that reinforce thrifty growth habits. The chapter gives specific tests to measure behavioral health of your plan. Track the frequency of reactive trades, count impulsive purchases above a threshold, and measure time to recovery after a market drawdown. If you find reactive behavior, institute a cooling committee. 2 trusted advisors who must approve large deviations from plan for a short period. The author also covers the architecture of abundance versus scarcity thinking. Train for abundance by scripting small gratitude and sufficiency practices that reduce competitive consumption and stabilize long-term focus. Practical exercises close the chapter. Run a 30-day savings sprint with public accountability. Set a 3-month experimental rule where you reinvest a flat percentage of passive income automatically, and carry out an emotional audit to surface money stories that sabotage long-term plans. Behavioral finance is less about perfect self-control and more about designing systems that do the hard work for you. When you combine structural rules, social scaffolding, and small psychological practices, you massively increase the odds your assets compound rather than leak away through predictable human mistakes. Chapter 18: Technology and AI. Using modern tools to amplify asset productivity. Technology is the multiplier that turns modest asset bases into efficient, low-friction income engines, and this chapter gives an owner's guide to choosing, implementing, and governing tech so it amplifies cash flow without creating new single points of failure. Start with the principle of targeted automation. Automate what is repetitive, error-prone, and high-frequency. Avoid automating exceptions or unique customer experiences where human judgment adds disproportionate value. The chapter provides an asset-by-asset playbook. For subscription businesses, deploy robust recurring billing platforms with automated dunning user segmentation for retention campaigns, and analytics that surface at-risk cohorts. For rental portfolios, integrate property management software that automates rent collection, maintenance tickets, and vendor dispatch while providing tenants with digital self-service. Link that to your accounting system to close the books automatically. For creators and IP owners, use content management systems that schedule cross-platform publishing, track engagement, and automate affiliate payouts. Across these use cases, the data hygiene rule is paramount. Garbage in, garbage out. Establish consistent naming, standardized metadata, and a canonical CRM so automated actions are accurate and auditable. Next, evaluate AI as augmentation, not replacement. Use AI to accelerate research, draft marketing copy, summarize legal contracts, and triage customer requests. But always pair AI outputs with human verification, especially on quality-sensitive touchpoints like legal terms, financial projections, or brand voice. The chapter includes guardrails for ethical AI use, transparency with users when AI participates in decision-making, privacy-preserving designs for customer data, and periodic model audits to detect drift or bias. Security and resilience are treated as infrastructure priorities. Use cloud providers with strong compliance certs, implement multi-factor authentication, back up critical data across regions, and maintain incident response plans. For financial assets, ensure payment processors are PCI compliant and implement automated reconciliation to detect discrepancies quickly. The chapter emphasizes integration over replacement. Prefer API-first services that let you stitch best-of-breed tools rather than monolithic platforms that create lock-in. Build a lightweight tech stack with clear ownership, who manages billing, who monitors uptime, and who handles vendor escalations. This prevents the founder from becoming a middleman for every tech issue. Talent matters. Hire or partner with an operations technologist who understands both business flows and automation tools. This role is often the highest ROI hire for owners scaling assets. Finally, measure impact, not activity. For every automation, track time saved, error reduction, and incremental revenue or retention improvements. Use small pilots, measure results over 60 days, and scale what demonstrably improves unit economics. The chapter closes with a 90-day tech sprint template. Identify one repetitive task across assets, document the process, choose a low-code automation tool or API integration, implement, and measure. When technology is used deliberately with strong data discipline and human oversight, it converts fixed effort into scalable systems that increase yield, reduce friction, and make perpetual income genuinely low touch. Chapter 19. Impact Investing and Philanthropy. Turning perpetual income into purposeful power. Impact is no longer an optional add-on for asset owners. It is a multiplier of resilience, reputation, and long-term value. This chapter treats impact investing and philanthropy as strategic levers that both do good and strengthen the durability of your income engines. Start with a simple reframing. Perpetual income that ignores externalities often carries hidden risk, regulatory backlash, community resistance, or brand damage that slowly erodes returns. Aligning your assets with constructive social outcomes reduces those risks while opening new forms of capital and partnership. The chapter opens with a case study of a landlord who turned a set of aging rental properties into a community-stabilizing portfolio by investing modestly in energy efficiency, tenant support programs, and partnership with local workforce organizations. Rents rose modestly, turnover dropped sharply, and absentee complaints diminished. The net result was more predictable cash flow and a lowered vacancy profile. Impact investing in this pragmatic sense is not a moral vanity project. It is due diligence that increases the probability of smooth operation across cycles. Begin by defining what impact means for you. It can be narrow and measurable, reducing carbon intensity per unit of production, increasing local employment, or improving tenant retention, or broader, like improving financial inclusion through small business lending. Choose 2 to 3 measurable outcomes and a relevant metric for each. This specificity matters because it converts vague good intentions into operational priorities and measurable returns. Next, incorporate these metrics into your underwriting and acquisition frameworks. When evaluating a new asset or business, ask, does this opportunity allow us to advance our selected impact outcomes without sacrificing core economics? If yes, model both the financial and impact flows together, because many impact interventions have quantifiable returns: reduced operating costs from energy upgrades, higher retention from tenant services, or access to lower-cost capital via impact funds. Impact capital is expanding. Mission-aligned lenders, community development finance institutions, and green bonds are increasingly available to owners with credible impact plans. Structure partnerships to access these pools of capital when they reduce the overall cost of ownership or enhance liquidity. The chapter explains common structures: blended finance, where philanthropic or concessional capital absorbs early-stage risk to unlock private investment; program-related investments from foundations that accept below-market returns in exchange for social outcomes; and green loans tied to verifiable environmental performance. Each structure requires transparency and reporting, so build simple measurement systems from the outset to avoid expensive retrofits. Philanthropy can be an amplifier of impact investing. Instead of one-off gifts, consider evergreen philanthropy, an endowed fund or donor-advised fund that receives a small, steady portion of asset cash flows and distributes grants aligned with your impact metrics. Evergreen giving creates a permanent bridge between private wealth and public good and can be tax-efficient in many jurisdictions. The chapter profiles several pragmatic models: a percentage pledge of net cash flow to local community programs, a revolving microloan fund that recirculates repayments to support entrepreneurship in areas where you operate, and collaborative grant-making with local partners to fund workforce training tied to tenant needs. These models are small relative to asset scale, but disproportionate in local goodwill and social stability. Measurement is the technical backbone. Choose a handful of indicators that are easy to collect and hard to game: energy use per square foot, tenant retention rates, number of local hires in defined roles, or verified carbon reductions. Build a quarterly dashboard that shows both financial and impact KPIs side by side. Investors, lenders, and community stakeholders appreciate simplicity and honesty. Avoid impact theater, where expensive consultants create glossy reports divorced from reality. Instead, demonstrate incremental progress and be candid about what failed and why. That humility builds trust and long-term partnerships. Ethics and governance matter. Embed independent oversight where appropriate: an advisory committee, community representatives, or third-party auditors, to avoid greenwashing and to ensure that the benefits you claim are real and durable. Clearly define the trade-offs you accept and maintain transparent reporting to stakeholders. The chapter emphasizes reciprocity. Align incentives so that tenants, employees, and partners share in upside when assets perform well. Profit-sharing mechanisms, revenue-linked bonuses, or tenant improvement funds can align interests and reduce conflict. Finally, Impact expands optionality. Assets that contribute to social or environmental resilience often enjoy lower political risk, better local relationships, and access to special capital, advantages that compound over decades. The practical next steps are concrete. Pick one asset where a modest impact intervention, a retrofit, a tenant support program, a hiring partnership, could reduce operating costs or turnover. Test it at pilot scale for 6 months, measure results, and then scale. Allocate a fixed percentage of incremental yields to further impact experiments so the work funds itself. Impact is not charity detached from strategy. It is a core part of durable asset design. When your assets improve communities, they also improve their own chances of paying you forever. Chapter 20. The Founder's Long Game: Habits, Renewal, Stewardship, and Legacy. If asset architecture is the hardware of perpetual income, the founder's long game is the software that keeps the machine running. Habits, renewal practices, governance, and a plan for what happens when you step away. This chapter is a practical playbook for the interior life of ownership, arguing that longevity in wealth requires the same operational discipline you applied to building assets. Begin with habit architecture. The author profiles a set of compact weekly rhythms adopted by long-lived owners: a focused financial review, a short operations audit, and a creative growth session. The financial review is not micromanaging cash flow. It is a disciplined check on exceptions, variances from forecast, headline customer churn, and unusual vendor behavior. The operations audit spot checks service quality, vendor performance, and customer sentiment. The creative session protects the future. It is time for experiments, strategic partnerships, or new product ideas. Make each session small, scheduled, and non-negotiable. Guard them fiercely. The compound benefits show silently over years. Renewal and stamina are equally practical. Running assets across decades demands periodic rest cycles to avoid decision fatigue and to keep perspective. Block quarters for renewal, no acquisitions, no major launches, dedicated to learning, recovery, and recalibration. Invest in health, relationships, and learning because your judgment is the most valuable asset. Small rituals, morning intention setting, a nightly one-line reflection, weekly no-meeting afternoons. Protect attention. The chapter shares stories of founders who lost years of optionality to burnout and those who extended productive stewardship by structuring renewal into the calendar. Leadership and governance are structural. Transition from being the person who does everything to the steward who sets standards, hires for reliability, and creates decision frameworks. Implement a simple governance cadence: monthly KPI reviews, quarterly strategy sessions with an advisory circle, and annual stress tests of key assumptions. Build a bench, train successors, and cross-train critical roles so the enterprise does not hinge on one person. Design compensation and equity incentives that align long-term performance with reward and that make succession smoother. Legacy planning is a delicate mix of finance and psychology. Decide what perpetual income is for: family stewardship, philanthropic impact, or continued entrepreneurship. Then build the vehicles: trusts, family governance charters, legacy funds that translate intent into practice. Create a short legacy letter that explains values, operational expectations, and desired uses of income. This simple document prevents conflict and orients heirs. Keep legal structures flexible enough for changing realities, but precise enough to avoid ambiguity. The author stresses humility and learning. The long game is not about being right all the time. It is about being teachable and iterative. Convene a small group of peers for quarterly calibration. Share hard lessons and seek contrarian feedback. Maintain a modest learning budget and read widely about adjacent domains, policy shifts, technology, and demographic changes that could alter asset behavior. Finally, habit and humility produce stewardship. When the founder treats assets as systems to be passed on, clean books, documented SOPs, trained operators, and clear governance, the income truly becomes perpetual. The chapter closes with a one-year stewardship plan. Schedule weekly habit blocks, institute quarterly renewal periods, create a succession learning plan for 2 potential leaders, and draft a one-page legacy letter. The long game is not passive waiting. It is deliberate cultivation. When you steward with care, your assets become instruments that fund a life chosen, not a life forced by income needs. Conclusion: the small steps that compound forever. Perpetual income is less about a single brilliant trade and more about 1,000 small, consistent decisions seeded over time. Choosing cash flow over speculation, productizing work, protecting downside, automating what repeats, and aligning assets with social resilience. The common thread through every chapter is practical humility. Pilot, measure, adapt, and protect. Start with one micro prototype this quarter, commit to a simple governance rhythm, and create a modest buffer for shocks. Use impact as a guardrail and habit as your operating system. Over years, these choices compound into options: time, freedom, and the capacity to contribute. Build patiently, steward generously, and design so the income you create can pay not only your bills, but the future you intend to live.